What has an acute impact on the housing market? A high correlation between the US and Canada and smells like money? Stick around to find out how the answer might just be keeping homeowners from listing their properties in this episode of The Lead. Over the past few months, I've been noticing that new listing activity in our market isn't coming in at the levels that it has historically, and that's been puzzling a lot of housing market analysts, myself included. Here's a plot of new listings for every April going back to the 1980s. We can see from the plot that even though the current pace of new listings isn't quite the worst we've ever seen over the past 40 years, it's definitely on the low side. And while I've heard a lot of stories of homeowners not wanting to list for various reasons, I've been feeling a bit unsatisfied with the lack of a testable theory. And then a few days ago, I came across this interesting data set from the US that sparked an idea. What if the trend we're seeing up here in Greater Vancouver is happening in a bunch of other places? If it is there something that links this trend in all of these places together? Let's find out. To start, here's a plot of trended new listings data across 48 US states with the data indexed to January 2022 so that we can see if new listings have been trending higher or lower over the past year or so. Looking at the plot, it seems like our neighbors down south are also experiencing a downward trend in new listing activity across every single state. And I'm no expert in US housing market data, but this kind of synchronicity probably only happens as a result of some big macroeconomic factor influencing things in the economy. Let's hold that thought for a minute, and let's take a look at what's been happening closer to home. Here's the exact same plot of trended new listings data, but this time focusing in on a bunch of markets in Canada. It's a bit of a messy plot, but I can thicken up the line for Greater Vancouver to make it a little easier to pick it out of the crowd. Now, you don't have to be a conspiracy theorist to think that there has got to be something linking these extremely similar trends together. And this brings me back to the riddle I opened this video with. It seems to me the most plausible factor linking these trends together is the rapid increase in mortgage rates we've seen over the past year or so. And the reason this has happened just about everywhere is because central banks around the world have scrambled to try to tame inflation by jacking up interest rates. And this has had a pass-through effect into mortgage rates. Okay, but why would higher mortgage rates translate into lower listing activity? Well, to answer that, we need to come up with a bit of a theory. So let's start out by asking ourselves, who has a mortgage in Canada? Now, the Bank of Canada already dug into this question a little while back, and according to their calculations, 65% of Canadian households do not have a mortgage at all, while the other 35%, they do. But these stats I just showed you include renter households in the calculation, and renter households can't really list their rental unit for sale if they don't own it, at least not legally. So if we yank out the renter households from the calculation, we find that about 44% of homeowner households have no mortgage, while about 56% are stuck paying one off. And the Bank of Canada also broke out the proportion of mortgagers by whether they were on a fixed rate or variable rate mortgage. And it turns out about 71% of households with a mortgage are on a fixed rate, while the other 29% are on a variable. Okay, that's a lot of mortgage stats. But what does this have to do with new listings activity? Well, consider this plot of the age distribution of homeowner households comparing those with and without a mortgage. Notice anything funny about this plot? Turns out, homeowner households with a mortgage in Canada are a lot younger than homeowner households without a mortgage. And that makes perfect sense since older folks have had a lot more time to pay off their mortgage. But younger households also tend to do one thing a lot more frequently than older households. They move. Younger people get new jobs, they have a baby, they maybe have another baby, they get married, they get divorced, they get a dog, you name it. Younger households have a lot more reasons to move than older households do. Okay, so where am I going with all this? Well, if you're a younger homeowner with a mortgage, we know there's a 71% chance you also have a fixed rate mortgage. And if you took out that mortgage at any point prior to the last 12 months, you're also probably enjoying a much lower fixed rate than you could get today if you had to renew or break your mortgage to move. See where I'm going with this? But how do we know how much financial pain a young homeowner would endure if they decided they wanted to move and break their mortgage early? Well, we can use historical data to check the difference in mortgage rates a hypothetical mover would face based on how long ago they might have taken out their mortgage. Here's a plot of what that looks like over time. What this plot is telling us is that historically, when these curves cross above the zero line, there's a disincentive to breaking the mortgage early because you're going to end up paying a higher interest rate. And when these curves pop above the zero line in a pretty big way, as they're doing right now, it tells us that breaking the mortgage early could be a fairly painful financial decision. And when you tack on the B20 stress test we have up here in Canada, the prospect of breaking the mortgage early gets even less enticing for young homeowners with a mortgage who might be thinking of moving. Alright, so we've got a neat and tidy theory. Now it's time to check if this holds any water. One way to do that is to take the data I just showed you and compare it against new listing activity to see if there's some kind of correlation. If the data supports the theory, we should expect to see a negative correlation in the data, meaning that periods in history where breaking the mortgage early would result in having to pay a significant premium should also be periods in time where new listing activity was lower. Here's a plot checking to see if that's the case. We can see from the plot that the relationship we expected is definitely there in the data, but it's not really the tightest relationship. That could be for a bazillion reasons, and a simple correlation plot like this can't fully account for all of these possibilities, but it does give us an inkling whether there's something to the theory or not. In this case, it seems like there probably is. So there you have it. Rising mortgage rates, mover households, and the mystery of the missing new listings. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for future episodes of The Lead.